Yeah, that. Somebody tells you to send it.
So please listen with the motivation of bodhicitta.
Tawa dan gomba dan jeba, mochi tawa gomba jeba sum dan jiwu da jeba shi pa nani. Ne tawa da gomba song ne ta, drengi ne ka su tanda ne ka ta jeba ne tues.
So the main part of this text comprises discussion of the view, meditation, conduct, and also results. We've covered the view and meditation, and now we start to look at the action, conduct.
Tene jeba chosam temba ni tedring yambre shiyabi nekab na namtok serbo tolki juwa am so wongi tsuldo ni yungi tse namton juwa tangrik na ne hong tela jitu zangin gadu so kaya nicha sherwa thongwa thap sherwa thongwa thap sherwa tindi nga do rambab shogosa tadi kanso resina ta chopa se ta chopa ta mashi zoba chimbu ge tawa la tene kan zoba chimbu la tawa ta gomba chopa sundi khewa khepri chibu jawo ma o ya tene disune kanso sana tawa tame gomba gomdu me chopa chime diu dubu me sida kengi kana chingudane tawa segenda gomba segenda chama chenjiga yo mare kengi kana ta chopa segenti ripigi nang jalgile losu girwa chi ya chopa ya yo mare kengi kana chopa kancha ranzo sinada Indi kana ta chopa ti tene ripati ngale chopa boksu girwa kage mare ti indi ta te tene chopa ti chawar chawala tene chopa chosam temba ni se te tren nyabresh chopi ne kapna sa ta nyamsa ya bu jane sen chopa da tawi ngale pakron di ngala ran ho se shawa ne kapsu te nam to serbo tulgi juam se ta nam juwa wogyu suldu nyuk jungwi che sandi nam to servo tolgin juwa nam to servo sige ne sarwachi shadang inare ngarjale inaya thabo nam to inare te mai be karma ge nam to khande ji tolgis na lobur gi sare lobur gi nam to hort sharwa ne ka su sa sharwa am se tishan nan da wogyu suldu nyuk jungwi sindi wogyu sige nam to de wogyu che ba sige nam to de kare sana hame go nam to perna zai na chu juwa na zai na chu ju so na de na zang ba ting ye chu lu de gong ba jiao de nam sa gong ba chang de chu ji do chu zang bo yi na chu wo do na de mi tong go ma de gong ba jiao na de ne chu di na do ju tong go do pe de na xin nam to chao ne wo ju ge ji de ra pa de rang de chao ha me go la wo le nam to ju de de ti lo wo ju sa de wo ju che gi de dong ska le wa na nam to rakpati kiyawa sharawa haku, namto chawa di sharawa haku u mere dindu kawa tila kashi tila chuljam sere, chuljam sere namto yangji yangsonga tila chuljam sere ta chuljam tila wongju tila toks kebarare chuljam sere namto yangji yangsonga rang chul ha mago ni panji chuljik chulsonga ni ba dundegi tila chuljam sere wongju sere namto chawa tila gyudiwa ha mewa songma nangla shugyuba na songma sere nga zonga ni dang cholo soma so soma na chu ju de wa na thong ma wa ti dang za u bu na zang na chu ju wa na nam to chao bu de ro ju se ta de de nam to ra pa ju na da chawa ju na da se nam to ser bu thol kin ju am o ju su do nyu nyu se de na ta be chao nyu je se nam to ju wa ra ri na ne thong so ta rang ri ba i mo se wa ne ka so o ta ngi nam to ju gu du sa ko ne namto rakpa jugo na re cha jugo na ta nyamne yapo na namto jugo ha ko re namto jugo da ha ko goma ta do jitu sange gadu me je o tanga namto ji jugo du san ne tela ne dunang da wo me je a ya tene namto yakpo ji jugo du san gana ya me je namto kari ina ya namto khoron de o ju de ha ko ma ta do de ma ta do ma rang pap su sharbe na chol gore 근데 다 남동직이 돌돌 다 남동직 다들 오기 쓰는 들이지서 남동 락바지게나 남동 락바티 디페 나라서 고고 비지 삼노땅 비페 개초 디 망고지 디 하고 메 남도 라바지 끼니 페나 나라서 이나 탁 쓰긴 자체고지 자고 게이나자 야나 샤당도 이야기 지경 따르고 딩아 남도 계속 사는 리포트 마라데 남도데 샤당들라 식샤오디 가마 샤당데 파라 시로를 차 샤당데 말다 리포트 남 샤당의 야로로 샤당의 야로도 가라 땡아랑 저 샤당의 야 테니께 지금 이와들라 남도 틀리지마 슉좀하지 기샤 야지 샤당데 몸이 기샤당데 매바지라 즉 샤당 슉슉을 매긴 샤당지 꺄다 띵아랑 저 냠님 빼면 하고 베나 둘 깨바체시나 당 누구 말와 둘 세샤나 디캡세는 둘이야 총 두고 말데 다른 마시기 버도 저 강바 굴디긴 도당 고 구드 구조당 되게 좀 오페티나니 남도 라파디 강에 남도 차와지게 디 남도 차와게 와들라 오주세 디 어떻게 규들라 양 냠부 마데나 양 오규데 양 남도 슈슈슈슈슈 양 라파라 생기 냐가요 디인디가 남도 오규데 당고 남도 당고 모시네 남도 졸 서비스 양 남도 차와 충분 리아지 한국어 나신지야 롱롱야 샤롱기 당 육육스로 디샤롱도 딘남도 오규레 야 디라야 과 디랑신 녀부 신다오마 저거 전부 녀부 지라 랑샤 랑돌 당경도 녀부 야 디톨 랑샤도 컴플리트 거 남도 미나 차고레 디디 오규 티네 강세스나 저때 디세 예 가양사 텔라 지투상에 가두 남 가양 미체 셔와 토마 탑스네 하고와 타고 셔와 디긴간도 랑바쇼 양 오규게 똑같다 오규게 똑같 차와스나 이래 차와게 다빼 당하는 이 단다 시간에 있으나 되어요 남도 차고 유어도 하마고나 예 디텐 차오디나다 남도 rakpa지 rakpa지 남도 야 디제 남도 양 지금 마키빠지 지금 홍롱 디디야 그냥 리뷰가 샤네 바로 샤샤게나 대랑선도 돌로레스 셔와 디기가도 랑밥쇼에 남도 랑엘니스 티 오규제규를 봐야 슈트레스 오규 출바주기티 남도 야티 코롱들 남도 코롱을 도나 말ato다기티 랑밥쇼에 남도 랑엘니 나르게리 또 테로 레프르르세 어타 요규제단데 티라이 오규 코롱을 봐도나 말 샤메 롱롱부터 샤워 야나 근데 많이 베게 남도 차우 지교에 남도 차우 지교에 하고와 제니 베나 장문에 나나 추교에 하고는 오 대장문은 추교에 아서 공부 작업 말어 하는 거 베테나 진지게 남도 차우 교에 무슨 그 똑스 갈려요 그때 디디 무슨 서비스에서 양 리포트를 한 번씩 나와서 돌보내서 되는 거잖아 한번 양행장서 나르게를 또 때를 레퍼를 누르스 되고 내서 맞죠 되는 날진 방법 양행장 대들은 남도 상인 간셔를 양어서 친진이 미자랑 랑셔랑을 도서 단 남도 컨디션에 쳇도 연습을 미자와 되네텔라 랑셔랑도 방법에서 랑셔랑도스는 추이나를 못 잡아 다시 추이나를 못 듣제가 통화하고 야도 어디나 랑셔와 랑도로 추이나기 뭐하나시 추이나는 뭐야 그러야 뭐야 코로나에 맞죠 이나신지게 되네 추이 좀 뭐는 추이기 뭐하나시 랑샤라 랑도서 남도 코로나 셔라고 남도 코로나 하나 말하잖아 남도 랑시 디 네, 저봐 당셔라 들었습니다. 야, 남도 천진미자 랑셔라도 남도 졸룩 남좀 강들의 양 캐밋 변지를 랑셔라도 있는 성 다들 디토사 단지 강성에서는 남도 졸룩에 남도 졸룩 남좀 강다야 다 졸룩 남좀 생겨요. 졸룩 남좀 생긴데 남도 당부 조규디 내 당부 빨라 ya kene this namto tangbu moshine troba ngandi gi midan chapataw pena mingo shigin to na around the name je ji jasa tro magi jamjo kan oh di mi to so mi chi to lamsa moshine troba tine namto ne ni ke wa hakwa tine ngandi gi midan chapataw bardo namto rang troba durgi debashi pataw bardo nyamne yago jada te nyamne wa 남도디 샤와야 샤와티랑사가 돌로 빼나 둘기 두바데 코랑 약 야 코랑 라신 좀 미기 돌고 말 코랑 두바데 코랑 돌로 빼테나시 남도디 샤 남도디 돌게 랑데 남도 니빠 남도 랑랑 저 둘기 두바죠 아야 숨바 남도 페메 네메 강동도 꾸만 주었다고 숨바 강바동 거저 꾸만 준 적에 꾸규 가벼워 말 꾸규 가벼워 말 뭐만 밀라라게 강바동 거저 꾸만 이랬어 이 꾸만을 진짜비 강하고 밀라라 미지신다데 잘라주기 치꾸만 저 고자 밀라라 생겨 와서 말 이거 말 차이는 되지 애주도 딱 꾸마고 배살기도 쓰나 대 밀라라 셴셴무셔 난 인가르다네 많이 봐 쫓아 가는 얘기를 하다 밀라라 셴무셔 꾸마고 하하 스케줄에서 꼭 인가를 지가 코로나지가 막 가고 인자를 얘기하면 쫓아 가는 얘기 그래서 공부만 꾸만 주고서 지나게 강보통 말 꾸만 주는 밀라라 셴무셔게 나신 적에 아 배면 남의 강동도 꾸만 주었다고 또 남도 숨도 조당 숨도 공동체는 그래서 남도 졸룩 남숨 강들어야 하세 당분 남도 내 당분 남도 랑랑 뭐셔봐 능지기 미다 쳐봤다고 바로 남도 랑랑 들어와 늘기도 봐시봤다고 다만 남도 배면 남의 강동도 꾸만 주었다고 답에 몸이 아프죠 남도 깨시나 가게 팬다 거치가 내장 강보통 말 꾸만 얘기는 그 레카게 사토 말 신당을 길 너자 강게나야 난주로와도 시당거리 양을 그 페니시고 남도 랑랑 들어와 야트니 강동 꾸만 주고 뜻은 강동체나 야트니 고 졸고래서 남도 남도 졸로송고 강다라 양 김했던 제랑실랑도 있는 사람
So now we come to action, conduct. In the Great Perfection, it's taught that actually conduct, there's no big difference actually in the Great Perfection teachings between the Great Perfection view, meditation and conduct. It's not like conduct is something separate to training, really. It said in the Great Perfection that the view is without viewing, the action is without contrived action.
Tawatame, Chabachetme, Gobogumi, Dudumes, Tawatagime, Gobogumi, Chabachuguma, Ribacron, Mochila Shagumato, Jews again there, Tawas again there, Gobas again there, Chabas again there, Jews again there.
So
change it.
This is said in the Treasury of Dhammadhatu. It said there is no view to look at, there's no action to actually, there's no conduct to engage in, no meditation to train in, and no results to be attained. Meaning that all of these, the view, meditation, conduct, fruition, all of these are none other than intrinsic awareness. The view is Rigpa, the meditation is Rigpa, conduct is Rigpa, the result also is Rigpa. There's no like new results to attain. All that needs to be done is just to rest within intrinsic awareness, there's no more than that, and that's the case for the view, for meditation, conduct, and also for the fruition. So that being the case, here in the Great Perfection teachings, when we talk about action is essentially, it's said that the action is to maintain the recognition of Rigpa, to maintain the recognition of intrinsic awareness. No more than that. There's no like extra action that you need to train in or learn. So how to do this, to maintain this kind of conduct? The text says, then to touch briefly upon action. When you're resting in meditation in this way and a new thought arises all of a sudden. So when you're resting in meditation this way, namely letting mind rest within itself, within its own nature without contriving, and a new thought arises all of a sudden, all the undercurrent of thoughts churns away. So when it says here, first of all, a new thought arises all of a sudden, so you're resting at ease in natural meditation with mind settled in within itself, uncontrived. And then all of a sudden a thought arises, whether it be a thought of anger, pride, jealousy, or just a neutral thought, any kind of concept. This suddenly arises within your mind. this would be a more incident of a more coarse thought. Or there's another possibility: the undercurrent of thoughts churns away. The undercurrent of thought is what we call the undercurrent of thoughts is something that's quite subtle and difficult to recognize at first. Something that we're not easily aware of. It's not easily apparent, this constant undercurrent of thoughts. It's the undercurrent of thoughts is like we can understand it as being like water. Water that is, say, there might be a lawn that is soaked with water, but when you look at the lawn, actually you can't see the water, the soaked earth from above, right? So the lawn looks to you just like a nice green dry lawn. But when you start walking on it, then only then can you feel the water underneath, and you realise, oh, this lawn's flooded actually. So the undercurrent of thoughts is like that. It's constantly present there, but it's not easily recognised. So yeah, it's very subtle. It's a very subtle thing. If your meditation is quite good, quite advanced, then you will become aware of this undercurrent of thoughts. But yeah, it's not something that immediately is immediately or easily recognised. So in either case, whether when you're resting in this uncontrived natural meditation in this way, whether a new thought arises all of a sudden, or whether it's the recognition of this very subtle undercurrent of thoughts that is constantly churning away, rising thoughts are seen from the experience of your own Rigpa. From arising thoughts, whether they be subtle or coarse, are seen from the experience from within your own Rigpa, because these thoughts arise from nowhere else than one's own intrinsic awareness. So that being the case, when you recognize them, don't follow them, considering them good or bad, pleasant or suffering. Don't do anything, in fact. Just to go back to the undercurrent of thoughts, like I said, this is a very subtle level of thought, a subtle level of thought present within the mind. There's another term called stream of delusion. Another term called stream of delusion, and some people explain the undercurrent as being stream of delusion, as being the same thing. But actually there's a slight difference between these two terms. This term stream of delusion refers to how when you are resting in meditation, a thought arises, and you fail to recognize it at first. And so you fail to recognize it, and actually at some level your mind is chasing after this thought, which then leads to another thought, and you end up with a whole stream of distraction. One thought leading to another, and only after quite some time do you actually recognize that you've been distracted. So that's what's meant by stream of delusion, a period of distraction that you remain unaware of. The undercurrent is slightly different from that. Undercurrent of thoughts is referring to the subtle level of thought within the mind. It's constant presence of subtle thought in the mind that we are not easily aware of. And again, an example to illustrate this could be the example of fresh green grass that actually is wet underneath, but we're not able to recognize that wetness just by looking at it. So we're not able to recognize that subtle presence of water. Or, for instance, the example of straw or hay, that actually there's straw, water running through straw or hay, but to the eye it looks dry, right? But in actual fact there is some subtle water there. So like that. So whether it be a new thought arising all of a sudden or the undercurrent of thoughts churning away, when these rising thoughts are recognized, they're recognized from within the experience of your own intrinsic awareness. So when you recognize them, do not follow them, considering them good or bad, pleasant or suffering. So if, for instance, it's the sudden arising of a feeling of anger, when you recognize that, don't then get involved in judgment, thinking, oh, oh dear, this is a negative thought. I shouldn't have given rise to this thought. Or if it's a pleasant or virtuous thought, don't then get involved in enjoying that sensation or rejoicing in it or what have you. So don't react and don't consider these different occurrences as good or bad, pleasant or suffering, and react with this kind of judgment. Don't do anything, in fact. So don't do anything. Just as soon as merely recognize the occurrence, whatever it be, and then as soon as you've recognized it, just let be in an uncontrived, unfabricated way. The interesting thing that happens here is that when you say a thought of anger, right, a coarse thought or perception or concept arises in your mind. Maybe like there's a loud sound which captures your attention, or maybe it be a sudden feeling of anger, and you recognize that, and as soon as you recognize it, it dissolves back into its own place, into intrinsic awareness, and is thus liberated. So this, through recognition, then this subtle, this coarse concept has been liberated in that first moment. But in the moment afterwards, in the moment afterwards, that coarse concept will not be present, but a subtle concept, a subtle thought will remain present. So it might be, so in the case of anger, the intense anger has been liberated, but in the next moment there remains kind of a trace of that anger. Still a very subtle form of that anger remains. For example, if you kill a snake, there's a writhing snake and you kill it, you cut its body in half with a knife. As soon as you cut its body in two, it's dead, but actually it doesn't stop writhing straight away, right? Even though it's dead, it still keeps on moving a little bit, and it takes a little bit of time actually to become completely still. So it's the same actually when recognizing and liberating these thoughts. You liberate the coarse thought, you might liberate the coarse thought straight away, but in the second moment there still remains this more subtle level of thought. And this is the undercurrent of thought. This can be the undercurrent of thought. And we need to recognize this undercurrent of thought, this much more subtle level of thought, and liberate it as well by applying the remedy. But what is the remedy? Well, the remedy is exactly the same thing. The remedy is merely recognizing and remaining uncontrived, so that thought can be liberated into its own natural state, into intrinsic awareness. So you can see in this practice, there is only one remedy. There's only one remedy. The remedy is simply recognizing and then resting without contriving, so that the thought, whether it be coarse or subtle, whether it be a sudden arising of thought or the subtle undercurrent of thoughts, so that those are allowed to just dissolve back into themselves and be liberated, spontaneously liberated within Rigpa. This readings. So don't do anything in fact, but as soon as you see the rising, within the rising itself, let mind find its own natural place of rest. Let the mind be without contriving in its natural state. By leaving mind in its own place, thoughts will disappear there and then, and you'll arrive directly at Rigpa once again. So again, this is saying that the very best way to liberate this subtle level of thought, this undercurrent of thought, is simply through recognition and resting naturally within intrinsic awareness. Merely through that, then the subtle undercurrent of thoughts will be liberated. Then, as before, maintain the practice of mind's own place of rest, meaning maintain the practice of resting, letting be uncontrived, letting the mind letting be uncontrived in the natural state of mind. In this way, whenever any good or bad thought should arise, don't grasp onto it, but allow it to be freed as it arises. There are three ways in which thoughts are liberated, but there's really no difference between them. They're all self-arising self-liberation. So when it says don't grasp onto it, but allow it to be freed as it arises, this happens just like writing on water. When we don't grasp onto thought occurrences and just let them be, they naturally liberate. They're naturally liberated. They dissolve back into themselves, you could say, or they're naturally liberated into Rigpa. And this is just like when you write something on the surface of water. As soon as you write it, it starts to dissolve out. You write another thing, and it starts to dissolve. Or like bubbles, as soon as a bubble kind of appears, then it immediately pops of its own accord. Like nothing else is involved, nothing else is needed to erase the writing on the surface of water or to destroy the bubble. It just naturally they disappear of their own accord. So thoughts are the same. They, when recognized and let be, they're liberated into themselves. They just dissolve and vanish into themselves. So there are three ways in which thoughts are liberated. The first way in which thoughts are liberated is liberating thoughts through recognition, like recognizing someone you know. So this is the way that thoughts are liberated by beginning practitioners. Just like when you meet someone you know, you recognize them, you recognize who they are. Likewise, as a beginner, when thoughts arise in your mind, then through recognizing them, becoming aware of them, and then just letting be, then the thoughts are liberated. So first of all, the thought arises, and the next moment you recognize it, and then through recognition, the thought's liberated. The second type of liberation is a natural or spontaneous liberation. Just like a snake undoing a knot in its own body. So if you tie a snake into a knot, the snake will just undo the knot by itself, right? Nothing else is needed. So at this point, this kind of natural liberation occurs when one is more habituated to the practice, more familiar. So as soon as a thought arises, it is naturally and spontaneously liberated. The moment, just upon arising, it naturally liberates. So that's the second type of liberation. And the third type of liberation is completely beyond benefit or harm, like a thief entering an empty house. So at this point, again, when one is even more familiar with the training, then no matter what thought arises, coarse or subtle, it can bring about no benefit or harm. It has no effect on the meditator whatsoever. Just like a thief entering an empty house, there's nothing for the thief to steal, right? So the thief can't do anything. Just like one time when a thief came into Milarepa's cave and tried to steal from Milarepa, but Milarepa had actually had no possession, so there was nothing in the night. So there was nothing for him to steal. This thief sneaked into Milarepa's cave at night and was searching everywhere in the cave for somewhere to steal, like with his arms stretched out in the dark, trying to feel around and find some object to steal. It seemed Milarepa was not sleeping, but just sitting up, and he was watching in the dark this thief search around for something to steal. And then he called out to the thief. He said, "Hey, you thief! If I can't find anything here in the day, how on earth will you find anything in the night?" Because Milarepa didn't own anything, right? So he said, if I can't find anything here in the day myself, so what do you think you're going to find in the dark? And then actually the thief himself burst out laughing when Milarepa said this. So this is the third type of liberation. Like a thief entering an empty house, no benefit or harm can be done. So at this level of practice, then no matter what thought arises, whether it be a neutral concept or an emotion of anger or aversion, attachment, what have you, it just has no effect on that practitioner at all. They're not. their awareness is not shaken or affected whatsoever. So, as it says, these are the three ways in which thoughts are liberated, but there's really no difference between them. They're all self-arising, self-liberation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Namdo Shija, Chukulong the Shan, Namdo Gacha, Ripulong the Gap, Sharia Minute, Roundru, Tonshena, Tawimbo, no only kitchen years on it, and deep perception. Namdo Sharian, Chukulong the Shas, Namdo Sharkiti and Chukulong the Shadows, Ripakurong Shadow, Sharsa Shendat in the Chosh and not young the Kapamaris. Oh, yeah, Namdo Gagan Ripulong the Gas, Namdo Gas on the Nikrapara. Ripulong the garden, Namto Sharian, Namda Penna Namkala, Jin Junsa de Namkal Shomari, Jin Tangu de Namkal Tango, Jin Dukala, Jin Second Dia, that Masidan Junshi Tamji and Namkal Shunjora, that did answer scientists get this was the Namkala Big Bang in the Jigjo, Depa, Torji, Sasha, Chucha, Mecha, Lungja sound, that is only the name, Mari. Sanji jumped in the color Lunga, Tamang Logan, I love Mangu, Taisha. Tandona Namkale Tamki Nuchi Tamki Namkal Jora, Tinia Tinajire, Namkale Tin Jong, Namkala Tim Tando, better Namdo, they are repeat long lecture, repeat long the Yako, the Indukala Tamki Teresa. That in the Indukala, the Indukala, Namto Gagan repeat long the gas. The Kandiga Sharian Mini round root no Donjena, Namto Kandisha, Namto the Shas of that best sauce on 8 Shadan, I just should say, Lane of Bassos and other Shadan gave one less out of Ranchi go Mars, only the Namto Shepherd the Tantuna, Namto Namto Sherwa, the Ripa Naval Kaki Quenchi Marilla. Namto Gaga, Namto Sherry Minu round Tonsina, Namto Sherry Minu round Tonsina, Namto Sherwati, when a Dulgi Dubashiwata, she told a remote Shinchigi, Para Ramsur Parton Shevaina, Sherry Minu round Tonsina, Tower of Borden won't be kitchens. Namdo Kasu Mashana, Ripatigas Ma, Namdo Mama, Ishe Mang, Shingpung Chena, Mepungche, the Sondo in Galanche, Sochun Sherab Trabani. Kazu Shing the Pungo the Shin Kazu, the Metigas Chair, Shadan Arkel Dosa Ransen, Kazu Mangajana, Nanjo Gom Yagan Serdanga, Gom Major Dojan Duguman Jamano, Gom Yashaking require Mochugain, the Gitz getting it, Namto, Pujuti, Shuk Chai, your race, the Indukala. Tower of Modeno, we catch you. Put it this mother son, put you up with Dagenson, Natural Gomba Shiggin son. Put you up with Chitty Cut or the Tongo and Marpa Tala Dab Chud, the Dubs on Chud Sound Sandori. Petina, Namdotia, Katusha, the report around the Tantuna, Namdotia, Sound Sound, Namdo the review or a Tardo, the Indukala, Namdo the Nika, Tizutamji, that's what much you should get to Maimba, Garabdurchi, the Sondu. Nanjur Gomba Shiggin Sang, Puchu Chapo, Dagin Sang, the Susun Sharab Chapo, the Shimbunchana, Mepunche, Shadang Mana, oh, yeah, the Numu Rana, Ishira, Numu Salna, Ishisal, that is the Bemusa Tadiria, Tana Yan Shuzubak. That is the Indukala, Tavi, Bodnovi Kitchen, US, Tetrabi, Namton Nuatan. Shervishila Nepa Mijung, Shetru Randu the Tang, Shetru Randu the Tang, Pargopson, Namdo the Chinung song, Namdo the Shuk the Chichun Rosha Resla. Then Shervi Shila Nepa Mijung, Namdo condition of Pargop, Chica, Necham, Nando Sharde, Shardena Kaki, Ripala Nuki Kagama, Penapu Temuza de Zadegen, Puru Semuza de. Chichi Kateja, Naranso gave Michimbuchi, Puru Temuzaga Tadina, and again the Penus Chawama, Korangatam, Temuza, Petina Shinjige, Namtoket, Ripala Nuki Mares, Shervishila Nepa Mijuve, Tulu Rabdin Tama, Ringi Wongs, Tulu de, Tulu Rapta Ringa, Tamasa, Rap the Necropa, Pemen, Kampong to Kumajuata, Ding the Necro, Lugi the Bashin, Tama. Necropora, Namton Washeva, Nantiki Mitanchava, Sundi, Rimbash in the Oris, Tambo Namton Washeva, the Neparto Namto, Roundova, Tama Pemenami, the Theatre Ugres, to look Ramdin Tama, Ringi Oms, Tetra to look at Madena, Namto Kariki and a young Kevati and a Trovato, Matumna, tamar tulwa to be to me on say tamar tulwi to me on namdo re la namdo nyembo re do chengi te kwan so ana shi yendo cha ge nyembo me do pa shenang ge nyembo dene ngaran so na di dental gombala so wata ya tene shenang ge nyembo chamba gombata timu ge nyembo dental gombala so wata ta dene shinji ge mayimba 상아 두지 태바 야라 나 셰게 예나야 되네 게림 나조림 나서 바다 되게람 방자레 냠보 레네잖아 방자 장기메다 냠보 장기메다 고 뒤주 타바도가 차로레 디유가 야쇼 냠보 야쇼티 라셔 가셔 랑루도 당기티 조과침도 도무 많이 보게 제주에 어디에 또 제소나 네 방자 탐제 뒤직도 방도 거리 도자 탐제 뒤직도 또도 막고 디마나 방자 방비기 뒤직다 도자 또 뒤직 연구 말해서 개와 하고서 롱좀 마하번데 특징 출주기 리우 당불다 제가 요레스 한번 들어보지 기미죠 남독 둘룩시 봐 주비 초세 남독 셔와 돌비도 하고서나 네 디는 저바 탐지도 초도 들어봐 디레서 단딜라 셰트로 리트로 랑트로 예트로 생아요 다디야 세라 칸도 펜데와야 오지 다디조 탐제데 군견 좀 지밀링 비긴 저와요 다디조 탐제 마셰잖아 이제 찾기면 다들지 샤샤네 가서레스
When a thought appears, it comes from the expanse of Dharmakaya, and when a thought goes, it ceases within Rigpa's expanse. These are such extremely precious lines of instruction. When a thought appears, it appears from within the expanse of Dharmakaya, and equally when a thought goes, when it disappears, then it ceases within Rigpa's expanse. So thoughts arise from Dharmakaya and equally they cease, they dissolve into Dharmakaya. They arise and dissolve from and into the very same place, namely Dharmakaya, intrinsic awareness. This is just like clouds appearing in the sky. Clouds appear within the sky, and then when they disappear back into the very same sky, right? It's not that they disappear into somewhere, they come from somewhere else and then disappear somewhere else. Rather, clouds just appear from within in the sky, and then when they disappear, they dissolve back into the sky. It's the same with thoughts. Thoughts arise from nowhere else than intrinsic awareness, as it says, the expanse of Dharmakaya. And when they disappear, when they cease and disappear, they disappear back into Rigpa's expanse. Risings are harmless if you know how to let them liberate naturally. So, if you know how to, if you have this instruction for letting thoughts liberate naturally upon arising, then thought arisings are utterly harmless. This being the case, there's no need for us to react with worry or the like if we notice thoughts of anger or attachment, harmful thoughts of negative emotions arising in our mind. Because with this instruction, if you know how to liberate them, then they cannot accumulate any karma, they cannot do any harm whatsoever. The moment they arise, when recognized, they're self-liberated. So there's no need to worry about the occurrence of thoughts causing harm. This is the special instruction to enhance the view. So actually this instruction this instruction enhances, this special quality is that it enhances the view. The more you practice this, to that extent the view will be more and more clearly ascertained. As it said, that the more thoughts, the more liberation. So if you have this, if you know how to do this, how to liberate thoughts upon arising, then the more thoughts that arise, the more instances of liberation you have, right? The more instances of spontaneous liberation. So then, as the great master said, the more thoughts, the more liberation, the more emotions, the more wisdom. The clearer, the more intense the emotions, the more intense wisdom. just like the more wood you have, the greater fire blazes up. This was okay, so the great master Zulchung Sherab Drakpa spoke these lines. So these are just a few lines actually from a long set of instructions that he gave. We don't have time to go through the whole set, but these are just a few lines from there. In the same vein, Garab Dorje, the great Dzogchen master Garab Dorje said, just like with the force of a pounding waterfall, water is clarified more and more. Likewise, the more intensely thoughts arise, the more Rigpa is clarified. So, like when water falls down in a waterfall and smashes on the rocks below, actually the water becomes purified through that violent process, right? It becomes clearer and clearer, cleaner and cleaner. Likewise, with thoughts, the more thoughts arise and the more intense the thoughts, to that extent, Rigpa, intrinsic awareness, becomes clearer and clearer, sharper and sharper. All of this, of course, is based upon on the presumption that one is a practitioner who has actually recognized intrinsic awareness and knows how to apply this instruction, right? This wouldn't be the case just for an ordinary person, but for a practitioner who has recognition of the nature of mind and applies this instruction, then this is the case. And this is one of the extraordinary things about the great perfection. Like this, as a previous quotation said, the more with this instruction, then the more emotions, the more wisdom. The more intense the emotions, the more intense the wisdom. So this is really a very special quality of the great perfection teachings, that this can be the case. So this is the special instruction then to enhance the view. If you exert yourself in this training in self-arising, self-liberation, then you'll have fewer thoughts. So as you habituate yourself to this more and more, then through the strength of your training, then the arising of thoughts actually will lessen. Thoughts will become less and also less intense, like the strength of the emotions. Disturbing emotions will become less, and their arising will not harm the ground. So the arising of thoughts, once you're endowed with this this method or instruction, then thoughts can arise, but they will not harm the ground. The intrinsic nature. They cannot harm the ground, the intrinsic nature. This is just like a child, so it will be just like a child, watching a child playing. A child can have very elaborate games and be involved in all of its games, and an adult might be watching that child. But of course, from the adult's perspective, the child's games are utterly harmless, right? They're of no consequence. They're just child's games. We don't have to pay so much attention to what a child's doing, right? Because it's not of consequence. So this is the case for a recognized practitioner. Thoughts arise, but they cause no harm within the ground. The three ways of liberating, lesser, middling, and great, will unfold progressively. So the three ways of liberating are what were just mentioned earlier. The lesser, middling, and greater ways of liberating, namely the lesser way of liberating, which is that of a beginner practitioner who recognizes thoughts who liberates thoughts upon recognition, like recognizing an acquaintance when you meet them. The middling way of liberation is spontaneous liberation, like a snake releasing a knot in its own body. And the greater or best type of liberation is that which is beyond benefit and harm, like a thief emptying an empty house. So these three ways of liberation will unfold progressively. So first of all, when you start your training, liberation occurs in the lesser way, like the way that is like recognizing an acquaintance when you meet them. And then as you progress in your training, then the liberation starts to occur in a spontaneous way, like a snake's knot, and then you reach the greater way with further liberation, where there's no harm, no benefit, just like a thief emptying an empty house. But without these key points of liberation, the final attainment of freedom will never come. So if you lack these key points of liberation, you will never attain complete freedom. Actually, there are many other remedies taught for instance, in the sutra teachings, where it's taught that different remedies should be applied to different emotions. Like for lust, you should meditate on repulsiveness. For anger, you should meditate on love. For pride, you should meditate on. For ignorance, you should meditate on interdependence and so on. So different remedies are given as antidotes for the different emotions. And even in the Vajrayana teachings of secret mantra, there are the methods of generation stage and completion stage, which are a kind of remedy for different types of delusion and afflictions. But in actual fact, none of these remedies will bring an ultimate end, ultimate liberation, ultimate freedom. Because there is no end to thoughts, right? Thoughts are that which need to be abandoned. And if it's a case of applying a different remedy to each different thought, because thoughts are endless, there's no end to the number of remedies we will need to apply, and so ultimate liberation will be impossible to reach. So the only way actually to reach the final attainment of freedom is through this supreme remedy taught in the Great Perfection, namely the remedy of self-arising self-liberation. What's being taught here, this is the supreme unsurpassed remedy. And regarding a more elaborate explanation of this point, you would need to look in the first chapter of the text by Rongzong Mahapandita called Entering the Middle Way, entering the Great Vehicle, entering the Great Vehicle, So you need to look at the first chapter there for a detailed explanation on this point. Not yes, one last thing. Knowing the way to liberate thought is the supreme form of action. Is the supreme form of action. So the way to liberate thoughts, there are again 5 different types of ways in which thoughts are liberated, like spontaneous liberation, direct liberation, natural liberation, and so on. These 5, but I won't go into those because we just don't have the time for that kind of detailed explanation. But there's a very detailed, excellent explanation of them by Sarah Kundro in her text, and also in Jigme Rinpoche's text and other places. Finish.
오케이. 땅까지 갈았어. 얘네 주도 니빠다 차가라 직접. 딘디 마차 때 숨바 숨 차가다 희와락자는 걸 배웠어. 디토데 사토 지기스.
So we'll stop now because with this we've concluded the discussion of action, conduct. So we'll stop. So now what comes next is an explanation of the results, the fruition. So we'll stop here for lunch and we'll come back at 2:30. And then I'll finish the rest of the text. I imagine it won't take longer than an hour, so we should be finished by 3:30, but at the very latest 4. So I heard some of you have to leave this evening, and for that reason we need to finish by 4, right? If that wasn't the case, we could spend more time and then maybe keep going till like 6.
Gom jagi chigo seres.
Now let's dedicate the merit.
Maya Samaya Sa